Hopefully I don't sound too despondent, but yeah, I've left this for like a week and a half before I made this video. I couldn't stomach it. I was just so fucking angry, so angry. It's really hard to stomach this shit. I'm probably going to be, I reckon it'd be $5,000 at least. You know, $1,000 to rip it down. You know, probably another $1,000 in, or $2,000 in parts now, maybe more. And you know, $1,500 to put it back together. Not to mention, you know, I change exhaust parts and other hoses. So I'm probably going to drop close to $8,000 coming back to New Zealand. $8,000? I could have gone cruising once for the best part of 6 months for $8,000. Yeah, lessons in life, eh? They make us smarter, or maybe just a bit hungry. Welcome to Trevor White Sailing. Today's topic we're going to discuss is my shitty engine. Well, it's not shitty anymore. It's been repaired, and my Yanmar 54 horsepower that I only installed a couple of months ago and subsequently nearly destroyed en route to Tonga is now back in the engine and operational, and it appears it hasn't suffered too badly from salt water. So today's topic is really just to discuss what I learnt in that process and how not to ruin your new engine. What processes I've put in place so that it shouldn't happen again. So the boat in the water, and did it professionally. I had a couple of mechanics help me install the engine, or rather I helped them install the engine. So I wanted to learn about these things, and I'd never installed a boat engine before. I had done a few cars and things like that when I was young on the farm and so forth, but not on a boat. And that was the first problem I had. I didn't have that knowledge. My mechanics made some assumptions which cost me, and I didn't do enough research on installation. I should have done that. So all of those factors basically created the problem of getting salt water into the engine. And that's what the problem was in the end. I thought it was a head gasket, but it was salt water in the engine, and it had come in through the exhaust manifold. And I'm not the first boat to have it happen, but it shouldn't bloody happen. And it shouldn't have happened on my boat, and it shouldn't happen on your boat. So what I learnt the hard way, which only recently, coming back from Yanmar last year, I did a head gasket on a Leyland. It was probably had 10 to 20,000 hours on it. Great old engine. Was going to rebuild it. My mechanic convinced me to upgrade because it was getting very difficult to get parts. So we upgraded to the Yanmar. It was a second-hand engine, but only had 200 hours on it, so very low hours. Did lots of testing on it. It performed perfectly, and we installed it. And one of the issues was my Leyland never had a anti-siphon device on it, and it was a good few inches higher than my my strainer inside the boat, raw water strainer. And the new engine was around the same level, if not a little bit lower, and it had not had a anti-siphon device on the previous boat for whatever reason, or not where I was. Not where it should have been on my boat. So that made it problematic for me. I didn't pick up on these things initially, and mechanics did make a couple of mentions of things, but they didn't tell me I needed to have an anti-siphon device, which I should have. And then I got the boat in the water. I did testing with a mechanic to make sure everything worked, and like alignment, everything else was perfect. The boat motor ran like a dream, probably a little bit under propped, but you know, next year putting a new prop on it. And I went off exploring for a month in Great Barrier Island and started the engine every day, checking it. You know, found a couple of little issues with the raw water, but really it was just little leaks and so forth. Picked up my crew, did a 2-day shakedown sail with my new crew, and then sailed back up to Whangarei. And there was a couple of warning signs, it was hard to start a couple of times, and I thought it was a battery problem, not not water in the engine, but it was probably water in the engine, and I didn't pick up on it. So, and again, starting the motor every day, the water wasn't getting time to build up. But sailing hard and heeled over, the boat was getting water in there. There's also the possibility that I may have left the gearbox in gear, and that enabled the prop to turn the engine, turn the raw water pump, which helped bring water into the actual motor through the heat exchanger and then filling up the exhaust. That could have been a contributing factor, but I don't know that. Normally I try and put the engine into reverse to lock the prop, and on my last boat I didn't have a lock on the prop. I just put a prop lock on it. So yeah, there's a few contributing factors, but I assumed when I was out sailing, and I was 350 nautical miles toward Tonga, and every day I would check my engine, check my engine oil, coolants, etc. Start the engine for an hour every night just to run it. That everything was good, but on the third day out, I had milky oil, and I was flabbergasted, and I assumed it was a head gasket because I just had a head gasket. And one of the things we discussed when we were putting this engine in was whether we should rip out the head gasket and put a new head gasket in, because it wasn't a new engine. But 200 hours, we decided we should take a punt on it, and I think that's still the right choice. But I assumed that I'd got a bad head gasket, and I didn't think about water coming in through the exhaust. I was just so gutted at the time, and I knew I wouldn't be able to get it fixed in Tonga, because I'd met people that had similar problems in Tonga, and they couldn't get it fixed. So I made the decision to turn around and go back to New Zealand, where I could get it fixed, and then start my trip again. So I turned around, as much as I didn't want to, and as much as the girls didn't want to hear it, and sailed 350 nautical miles back through the storms we just passed to New Zealand. And we got up to 55 knots, and it was pretty ugly and having no motor. And unfortunately, we managed to sail into the river with a rising tide, and sailed right up to the marina. And what I'd done on the way back is I pumped all the oil out and the water, and I put fresh oil in, and then I started that engine just outside the heads. It started okay, turned it off, and started just outside the marina. And we actually used that, and having the dinghy and the motor ready to use if we had a problem. But we managed to get into the marina, tie up alongside, and use the main engine. But yeah, the backup was going to be the dinghy and the outboard, which we'd used previously. But yeah, we had a great morning coming in. Everything worked in our favour, and we got into the marina, into Marsden Cove, where we then cleared customs. So the other problem was, I had put my motor in up near the Whangarei industrial area, at a boatyard up there, but the weather was shitty, and I couldn't get my boat up there easily, and it's going to be a few days with the wind as it was. My crew was leaving, and so I made the decision to use the Marsden Cove Marine mechanics, and they were fantastic guys, like really, really good guys, professional, did a great job, and but it took longer than I wanted. I hoped I would knock it over in a week, and I'd get my crew back together and we'd take off, but it took at least 3 weeks to get done, and there were some contributing factors to that. As you can see, when we stripped the engine down, we're trying to find out what was wrong with it, and it wasn't obvious that it was a head gasket problem, which amazed me, because I thought it would be an obvious head gasket problem, but it wasn't that obvious. So what it turned out to be was, well, we still don't know 100%, but I believe it to be water in the exhaust, coming up through the exhaust, going in through the exhaust valves, flooding the cylinders. And with the exhaust valves being in good nick initially, it took a while for that to actually happen. And so my exhaust valves were really quite rusty. Also, water got into the cylinder heads, or into the tops of the cylinders, and the injectors got rusty. So when they pulled the motor down, couldn't find an obvious fault, started looking at the the heat exchanger, because this engine previously had a heat exchanger problem but had been professionally repaired. We ended up steam cleaning it, acid cleaning it, couldn't find any problems there. So then we had to look at other options, and that was when we assumed, mechanics and I, that it was the exhaust. And I wasn't sure if my exhaust capacity was big enough, whether it was deep enough to allow the water to get down. So what I ended up doing is I ended up changing the exhaust. I ended up putting in a bigger muffler, putting it down an extra 200 mils to make it a deeper run into the boat. And then I also put in an anti-siphon device. That's the photograph of the anti-siphon device. And I didn't know that I needed an anti-siphon device because I hadn't put an engine in before into a boat. And so I made all these changes to the boat, put in the anti-siphon device, and explain what I've done so far. So the engine is going back together, which is a bonus. This is my little rear cabin, which is bloody tight and uncomfortable, but yes. So the one thing I have done is I've added a siphon brake. This is a Vetus siphon brake, and that's a heater hose, or exhaust hose in this case, running down to the heat exchanger, the back of the heat exchanger, and to the exhaust elbow down in there. So you can see the exhaust elbow, and that's the heat exchanger. So it goes up to the top of the siphon brake and then comes back down to the exhaust elbow. So when we're sailing, that should stop any water from actually travelling through the engine if we heeled over, because that's the level of the water right here, and the level of the water coming into the engine is slightly higher than the exhaust elbow. So potentially we could have been getting water coming into the engine when the engine wasn't running and just filling up the exhaust, filling up the wet exhaust down here in the muffler, and then it comes up that pipe there, up into the exhaust chamber, and then back into the engine. I made some changes to the exhaust, got the engine all back together, but one of the problems I had was I got the engine. The mechanics wanted to get the injectors serviced. They thought it needed it. I had no problems with that. A little bit extra cost, but it turned out to be a lot extra cost because the injectors were rusty and they couldn't be cleaned. They just wouldn't come good, and I had to buy brand new injectors, and that cost me another $1,500 Kiwi, and a few other little things. So in the end of the day, it took about 3 weeks by the time I got parts, etc. I got the thing back together, and and about $5,000, probably closer to $6,000 by the time I'd finished. And there's probably another 500 to 1,000 in parts, exhaust pieces, exhaust hose for the anti-siphon. The anti-siphon itself is a couple $100 Kiwi. So there's probably another $1,000 in there, and took about a month in the marina, so another $1,000 there. So it gets very expensive when you're hanging around trying to fix things when you didn't plan for it. Not to mention also hire car as well, because Marsden Cove is a good 30 minutes from Whangarei, which you need to go to get parts. So it became an expensive little adventure. It took quite a bit longer than I anticipated. My crew, who initially wanted to go back to Tonga, had to starburst. So Lena only had a couple of days with customs coming back in the country. So she had to leave and go to Bali, continue on with her journey. Claire went back home, back to work, and Esther went back home, and then when I was ready to head off again, she'd made other plans to head over to Australia, because she ultimately was going to go to Tonga and then back to Australia, which is okay. And but they all continued on with their previous plans, and I then sourced a new crew. So I had to source a crew, and that took a little while to sort out. And I was lucky enough to find a guy called Howard who had good sailing experience. He just wanted a few ocean miles. And then I found an Italian couple, Gio and Val, who wanted some ocean miles as well. But yeah, let me, we'll go into that later in the next video, my new crew, but let me show you the engine running. Well, it's been 3 weeks since, almost 3 weeks since the engine got we've got water in the engine on the way to Tonga. It's been, a little traumatic, quite expensive, and but today we got the engine running again. So it's only been running for an hour, and I'm just going to run it for the next 5 hours. And at 10 hours I need to change the oil. Took a while, fixed all the problems. I haven't had any problems since. It's been running perfectly, and hopefully it continues to run perfectly. And if you're putting in an engine, make sure you've got a decent anti-siphon, or at least you investigate that. Make sure your exhaust is appropriate. Those two factors, and then there was the other factor of potentially, if your engine drive shaft is not locked, potentially it could be bringing water into your raw water system and pushing it into your exhaust and potentially flooding your engine that way if your drive shaft is turning your engine. I know it's unlikely, but one of the videos I researched was potential for that to happen. Don't know how likely it is, but you have to try and prevent everything. So on my Yanmar, with the particular box I've got, I can put it into reverse, and that locks the shaft from moving, and I can eliminate that from happening. But yeah, I've eliminated all the possible problems in the future, and hopefully that helps you if you're putting in an engine, or if you've got an engine in and you want to make sure it doesn't flood. Anyway, catch you later, safe sailing, see you out there. We are about to New Zealand or Tonga, and we have a crew of 4, including myself. We have the lovely Vel on camera.
Yeah.
We have Gio, her partner, on the bow. We have Howard on the bow line, and we're about to cast off for the great unknown.
Woohoo! How it look like the weather?
It looks like hell.